Welcome to The Maintenance Mindset, an audio-video podcast brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network. I'm your host, Paul Rhodes, and over the more than 3 decades in the apartment industry, I've had roles that include being on-site, providing services as a vendor, creating and delivering multiple education programs, and active association work. This podcast is centered on the often overlooked role that our on-site maintenance workers play. You know, the men and women that respond in the middle of the night to the toilet call, or the after hours, it's really hot in my apartment request, or my favorite, my ring fell down the drain, get over here now. In other words, the often unsung heroes who are responsible for asset preservation and resident satisfaction. Working in multifamily maintenance provides interesting, sometimes amusing, and often fascinating stories and viewpoints. My encouragement to you is this: whatever you do it with a maintenance mindset. Hey there. Sorry. Thanks for joining me. I'm just finishing up my Grounds for Connection, the coffee from MMN. And I'm trying to actually recover from Apartmentalize. You see, I just got back, and that trip was amazing and fantastic in several lights. One topic was central to every single booth that you went past, and in my unscientific opinion, it was the most often repeated topic in every session. I mean, it even came up in the 2 sessions that I had the opportunity to present. The topic is AI, which you probably already guessed because of the title of this particular episode. I'm really just tired of it, and yet we can't get rid of it. AI, or I like to consider it now as FK, because it's fake knowledge. Yeah, fake, artificial, K, knowledge. That actually came from a challenge that I and the 2 other hosts of the Turnover podcast that I get to co-host with had when we recorded on the trade show floor. The rule that we set up for the episode that we did was no matter what the topic we were discussing, you could not bring AI into it. And we failed. The only way I got around it was I never actually said artificial intelligence. Instead, I changed it. So now that's my acronym, FK. But I wanted to talk about it, though, because for our industry and for industries at large, the entire real estate world, I cannot think of one that is not being touched by the technological advances that are happening at such a rapid pace. So I've dove, I can't even conjugate that word correctly. I should probably look that up. But if I did, I would find it about AI. I mean, let's think about this. If you go to your search engine of choice, whether it is whatever big name, Google, Yahoo, Alta Vista, whatever, Firefox, DuckDuckGo, Edge, a lot of them are in the browsers now. If you go to whatever one of choice and you type in any search term, now, instead of showing you individual web pages, you get a summary of the most often repeated words that are found on that web page. How often now are we, instead of going to any web pages, how often now do we stop short right there and look at that AI summary? Yeah, if you're anything like me, I catch myself looking at that summary more than I actually look at where the web pages came from. And that, quite honestly, is troubling. Yes, if you've listened to me or talked to listen to any of the webinars that I've done where this topic comes up, I am hesitantly optimistic. And both measures continue to rise equally. In other words, I'm optimistic for the applications that this technology affords us. This knowledge access gives us some amazing abilities in terms of medical practice, even terms of creative thought if used correctly. My hesitation, though, continues to rise at equal measure. I know presenters and speakers at conferences that now they come up with an idea and within less than 5 minutes, they have a fleshed out outline with handouts or interactions with the audience. They can even have a presentation deck all ready to go that would require minor tweaks, and they can get up and present it. I mean, it's possible that that this FK revolution is going to completely change a lot of things, which is why I've been spending a lot of time doing research. Because as the gray hair in a lot of rooms, and being hesitantly optimistic, I want to have my hesitation founded in reality. Well, one of the most opportune sources for research that I've been looking at is various webinars and podcasts online where people are discussing FK or AI in differing viewpoints. One of the most unique that I found was actually this guy by the name of Brett Weinstein, who is a professor of evolutionary biology. And first of all, it was just fascinating that here you have a guy that studied in physical systems. I mean, from Darwin to the changing of species of animal and plant life. And his quote that we're going to talk about, just because of how fascinating it is, I've started listening to his shows and I even picked up his book that I'm going to look through and read, just because the ideas he espouses are so outside the norm that you end up hearing. Now, the quote that I picked up, which actually led to this particular episode, is one that he did on the podcast. So, when he was asked his thoughts on AI, he paused and gave his background of being an evolutionary biologist and looks at evolution and the way that species go from being a single-celled organism all the way up until you get to you and I. And his quote was given in that light. And he said that he believes that mankind, all of us, are entering a time which is no longer complicated. It is now complex. And then he repeated it and he said, it's no longer complicated. We're going to something that is truly complex. And I stopped the show right then and there and I said, okay, what's the difference? What does it mean for something that we say on one hand is complicated, but that's not enough? We have to go to the complex, because I thought all of the amazing technological advancements that we've had up until now were complex. I mean, if you're watching me right now on your cell phone, that, in my mind, is a complex system. And yet, I'm wrong. See, that's amazing to me, because my dad, one of his early jobs was with NCR and National Cash Register, which back in the 70s was a company that was competing with IBM, International Business Machine, for computer supremacy. And, from what I understand, IBM won. But my dad got to work with NCR's computer to where he was working on a computer. He was doing the physical connections. Understand, this was before we had laptops, before we had screens to look at and keyboards to use. The computer that he worked on was a bundle of wires and tape and valves or tubes and things that I am talking way outside of my knowledge base. He actually soldered circuits and fixed connections and wires. And the programming that was done on those computers wasn't done by typing on a keyboard, or in our modern colloquialism, taking our phone and thumbing in whatever it is we want to communicate with the computer about. In his world, it was done by punch cards that had holes that you punch out. You run a series of these cards into that computer, and that's how the program got into the computer. It would crunch numbers, whatever it was, and then it would spit out the information. My dad told me once that the amount of memory capability that we have, that I'm holding in my hand right here, just because I've got a cell phone in my hand, the number here is orders of magnitude thousands bigger than what he had on the computer, singular computer that he worked in. In other words, what he was repairing was as big as a room. He got to stand up in this thing and actually work on it. And you see, in my mind, that's the transition that Brett Weinstein is going to where what my dad was working on, that's complicated. The cell phone, that's complex. And yet, after a little bit of study, I found out that no, both the computer my dad worked on and a cell phone, those are merely complicated. They are not complex. So I started doing some look into this, and I promise this all applies to you and I as we go forward in our careers. And this is a topic I firmly believe it's not only related to being a maintenance worker. This is for all of our properties and has the potential for scaling outside of multifamily. Follow along and let me know in the comments or wherever you're at, if you like and subscribe, what your thoughts are on the application of this. Because you see, basically what it looks like is if we divide it into three categories using what Brett Weinstein is looking at, we have these three categories. You have simple, complicated, and then we have complex. And the best understanding I could come up with about this is that simple is math. 1 + 1 = 2. That's simple because 1 is always 1. So if I take two ones, put them together, I get the answer 2. That is a simple math problem. Any known value plus a known value gives me a known value, and it always will. That is simple cause and effect. Take that and scale that along. That is simple technology. But then we get to complicated technology, and complicated technology is, instead of 1 + 1 = 2, now we're talking about 1 + X = Y. In other words, I have one known value that I have to add to an unknown value, and I will get a third unknown value. Just because one of those values is known, that is considered as a complicated math problem. So in other words, simple is basic math. Complicated is algebra. Neither one of those would be classified, based on this definition from Brett Weinstein, as complex. Complex math is A plus B equals C. In other words, all of the values change. And that's FK, fake knowledge, and more commonly known as artificial intelligence. Because if you and I, dear listener, were to go to our browser of choice and type in a simple command, let's take a command that is known by all of us related to maintenance world. If you went to your web browser and you type in toilet flapper, the response that you receive right now, based on the AI algorithms, when you type in toilet flapper, your answer will be different than my answer. Because, yes, we have a known thing, toilet flapper, but the way your browser and your search engine interprets those letters and words meaning will be completely different than how it is interpreted on my screen and what I end up seeing. The web pages that I receive are going to be different than yours, even if we're using the same browser, because of all of the variables that go into play. For some of you, if you went in and typed in toilet flapper, you would receive maritime toilet flappers. You might even get different types of toilets, whether it's gravity, siphon, porta-john, all of those different things. And whatever it is that you receive is going to be based on whatever history is there, not to mention whatever geotagging you happen to be at, where your location is, and all of the other data sources that feed in to whatever way or methodology your browser is using to look at toilet flapper. Now take that and magnify it for our world of property management. You see, AI, I call it FK because it's only as good as the information that it has been given. In reality, it's not intelligent. The way my understanding of it is, if we're dealing with a text-based AI system, it doesn't actually, quote unquote, know anything. What it does is mathematically, it takes a ratio of the word that precedes the word that it needs to put down or it needs to look at, and does a mathematical calculation for how frequently the next word is. So in other words, the sentence that I learned how to use a typewriter with, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, got all the letters in the alphabet in it. You start that out with the. And if the AI is being asked to create a sentence that has every letter in the alphabet in it, it may start with one of an article, because an article statistically is most often used, the most often used in the English language. So of course it's going to start. Statistically, more sentences start with that word than any other. What word comes next? It's going to look through all the letters and figure out, well, I'm going to need to use the word Q. Q is an adverb. It defines a action. So the quick that makes statistical sense. If our particular AI has been plugged in to all of the books that have been before it and come out on the other end, mathematically and statistically, the entire sentence will probably present itself, because that's one of the most often typed sentences for the AI. And here's the thing, though. If you change one parameter on the AI, it won't come out with the article the in the beginning. It'll come up with another sentence creatively, starting with the letter A or another word. Maybe it starts the sentence with Fox because there's an X in that. All of those change based on whatever parameters it's being plugged into. And that's just it. Using AI, using FK requires the viewer, the operator, to have an understanding on where this particular piece of information was trained. And that means that many of our management companies who are starting to use AI internally, they're using it for the one thing that it does really, really well. And that's analyze information and find out and make connections that are deeper or more hidden than what my finite brain can come up with, associate together, and put in and of its own. For that information, it's built for that. That is what it does well. That's how it works as a browser search platform. It goes out to the interwebs and mathematically comes back with the most commonly cited answers and references. And if it doesn't know the most cited, it uses inferences to determine what the most cited is. All of these it can do way faster and come up with greater quantities than what a human being can do on a computer screen. Now, arguably, I don't know which works faster, a computer or the human brain with synapses and that. And that's really not important for our conversation today. What is important for our conversation today, especially in light of the recent apartmentalize, is just how far along we are. I spoke with a couple of business leaders out in Las Vegas this past year, and I asked them very pointedly, how long until we begin to see an impact in our on-site teams for headcount? In other words, how long until we begin to use this analysis and capability for our on-site teams to be replaced by FK? One business leader, and they're all unnamed, one business leader said, oh, we've already started. We're using the broadly defined, and another term that I'm really having a hard time wrapping my brain around, the centralization model of call centers. Heck, for that matter, how many of our marketing now goes through a call center? In other words, if your web page, if your property is advertised through an organizational web page to where you go to ABC Management Company and they have a list of all of ABC's management company properties, you click on that, and the phone number that you receive, if you wanted to call or talk to someone, or even the contact me listing, how many of those don't actually go to the community? I mean, traveling around the country right now, if I want to book a hotel room direct with the hotel, I have to go through telephone gymnastics. And even then, when it finally answers with Bob's Hotel in Saskatoon, Michigan, I don't even know if that place exists, but if that answers, I have no way of knowing if that's a human being or a computer with a voice module hooked up that is programmed to respond in the way that a human being would. That's how far along we are. Our centralization that's happening in our communities, you go online, try and find a property management company, contact them online with a chat bot that you're communicating with. There is a high percentage chance that there's not a human being on the other end of that communication. Heck, there's now what are called agents that where I, as a customer, can actually go to a website, program an agent, tell this agent where I want to live, what size apartment I'm looking for, what my budget is, that I write and create this program, say go, and the agent, not me human, computer program agent will run out on the computer and contact, chat with other chat bots, make some decisions based on the parameters I put into it, and spit back to me the one apartment community where I need to go to. In other words, FK, based on the technology that we're dealing with, is so complex that in tasks, and we're no longer talking about simple tasks, in tasks, it is taking the place of human beings. And our corporate leaders are beginning to tap into that. AI is complex, and we're headed there. But you know what? AI is not all powerful. And that's where we get to, and what I wanted to bring up, and what I'm expecting to be a continuing series that over time, I'm calling what AI can't do, because there's limitations, especially for those of us in maintenance. For a long time, I've been saying that, you know what, maintenance people have job security because, one, entropy is job security. The buildings will always begin to fail. They will always break. It's a law of science. Things go from order to disorder, and we are the bulwark against disorder, against things that break. And when they do break, we're the ones that respond. Another joke of mine is the fact that no matter how advanced technology gets, there's no app on this cell phone device that can run a toilet plunger. And residents, they don't want to run toilet plungers. We've talked about that before, so I'm not going to follow that thread. We do have other parts of our on-site teams that they're going to change. Several CEOs have said, yes, their organizations already have plans in place to begin decreasing headcounts at their communities. Repetitive activities, accounting, resident communications. Heck, when we went through the pandemic, we have residents that are interested in, and by my reading, an entire generation that prefers to not have human interaction. So if all those things happen, how far away are we from having this complex technology that can take over some human tasks from manning our offices and requiring not a lot of skill for the people or the human beings that need to be there? Heck, one CEO said acronym, one of the acronyms said that it's his expectation that within the next 5 years, the only people in their office are just there to get packages and to put in work orders for residents who don't at the moment have access to whatever resident portal they're using or be able to call the chat bot. That's amazing. Again, hesitantly optimistic. From a maintenance standpoint, right now, because this thing still can't diagnose an air conditioner without human interaction, the maintenance side of the house is a little bit good. And that's where we are, right? Because artificial intelligence still requires hands, fingers to use the tools that are necessary for us to maintain our buildings. But it's not only that AI cannot do. I mean, I got a phone call here last week. As a matter of fact, my phone rang and I answered it. Yes, I do still answer my phone. I didn't recognize it, but it didn't pop up as spam. It was a regular phone number. You know, I got all the spam blockers or whatever it is on my phone. It came through. So, okay, I'll answer it. I answered it, put it up to my head. And after a couple of clicks, which frequently when you hear clicks, you know you're not going to be talking to a human being, but I heard a human-esque voice that changed its tone and got a little bit louder and a little bit quieter. It was a very, very good vocal model computer, but I knew it was a computer when it said, "Hello there, this is Tom. Do you happen to live at 123 Main Doctor?" Yeah, you caught it, didn't you? 123 Main Drive. DR period. The abbreviation. I knew instantly I was talking to a very good verbal computer. Now, it's my understanding through talking with some other friends who are really plugged into this property technology that the AI telephone chatbots are really good. They can even respond to changes in a human's tone of voice. I mean, if you think back over the past roughly half hour that we've been talking, the two of us, my voice hasn't stayed monotone. I've gone up and down. Sometimes I speed it up. Other times it's slowed down when I want to emphasize something. That's a human trait. And those convey emotion. As a host, I'm trying to convey the emotion and draw you into what it is I'm saying. That's a part of this game that we play in the podcast world. Well, on the telephone, if I'm talking to a computer and the computer doesn't pick up how frustrated I am because of whatever it is that's going on, then the computer is going to do nothing else but make me more frustrated. But now it's my understanding FK can pick that up, but they can't do everything. The first thing to highlight is that AI still has problems when we context shift. In other words, like that example, taking the abbreviation DR, and in that case, that instant, the AI did not change it to drive. It said doctor. Needless to say, I hung up quick because I don't like talking to computers. I don't use chatbots wherever I know about them. I do not like to deal with computerized customer service. I want a human being, especially if I am taking the time out of my schedule to place a phone call. I'm a human. I want to talk to a human because of the second thing I want to highlight, that AI, and I firmly believe this one, AI will never get complex enough to actually do. And that is care. At the end of the day, AI, a computer, is just that. It's a bundle of ones and zeros, binary code, or whatever language that it's programmed in. But it's not a human being. Human being, we are wired for connection to other human beings. That's why we need each other. in our lives. It's a part of mental health. It's a part of our compulsion system to make families, to know each other, to be friends. That requires caring. AI or a computer will not be able to replace that. And on our properties, if we get rid of our on-site office teams and we go to a complete chatbot portal computer world, we're going to lose that caring. Yes, I know we lease homes. We have boxes where our residents pay a monthly rate and they move in and all of their worldly possessions are there. But you know what? That is merely a unit. The memories that are made by moving into that box, that's what makes it a home. And the fact that you go from having physical possessions to turning something into memories, that is so complex that, just like what Brett Weinstein in his quote is referencing, we'll never be able to honestly fully understand and yet again completely replicate. This is why, as we make this transition from being complicated to complex, keep in mind that that technology, even this infernal cell phone that I don't like, but I have to live on, even as complex as it is, see there, I got me. Even as complicated as it is, it will never, ever replace the importance of me walking up to another human being, shaking their hand, looking them in the eye, and being able to, without anybody seeing anything, saying anything, I can intuitively switch from being loud and excited and joyous to consoling and empathetic. They don't have to tell me that they just had a major shock to their system. They don't have to say words in order to do it. Through my human reasoning and caring, I can see something and context switch instantly. That's why FK will never replace human beings. Thank you for joining me on this episode. I would really be curious to what your thoughts are. So if you would, leave me a comment below wherever you find this, or reach out through at MMN's website. Thank you for joining me. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week, and I'll see you somewhere. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Maintenance Mindset. I hope you take away ideas that apply to your current and future career goals. Please check out Maintenance Mindset Minute to hear short-form, high-impact, applicable, maintenance-centered information. Whatever you do today, do it with a maintenance mindset. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, and subscribe. Visit multifamilymedianetwork.com to learn more about our other industry podcasts, thought pieces, and sponsorship opportunities. I'll see you somewhere.